All right, guys. So without further ado, let's give a virtual round of applause for Rumbi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this fantastic opportunity. As Candy mentioned, my name is Rumbi Petrozzello, and I am a CPA, which stands for Certified Public Accountant, which I think does not even begin to describe what I do. And I think about the work that I do being important enough because what I am involved in is the language of business, working with companies to make sure that you make your money and keep your money, and all those fantastic things. A little bit of background about me. Not only am I a certified public accountant, a CPA, and you should remember that, like if you're looking for somebody to work with your money, ask them if they're a CPA, because that is a sort of stamp to know that they understand what they are talking about. The profession of the CPA designation is 126 years old. In New York, there is a state society, which is 125 years old. And last year, actually, it's 126 years old now, because that happened in January. But last year, I actually served as the first Black female, or actually woman of color, period, to be president of the New York State Society of CPAs. And I say this because it's important, because this is a profession that does not have the amount of diversity that it should have, because in every community, we should have people who not only understand money, but understand who we are and what's important to us. But I'm not here to sort of get onto my soapbox about that. What I'm going to do today is speak with you about some of the fundamentals of money. And I will start off by saying everything I say is just scratching the surface. There is so much more to learn, but I want to go through some very important basics around finance. So what I'm going to start off with is budgeting, right? And so why should you budget? And I will say this, like often, at least in the past, I've always thought I don't want to think about my money because I know I don't have much of it. So perhaps if I ignore it, it will sort of stick around. But it is very important, because if there are things you're aiming to do, we live in a world where I guess only love is free. So if we're thinking about attaining goals, it is important that we sort of think about how much it'll cost and how we're going to get there. And now, very, very important, don't spend money you don't have, because if you do so, you will drown in debt. And I don't know if you read the news, but right now, interest rates are a lot higher than they used to be. And I will share, last year, interest rates were, for a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage, so that's almost the cheapest debt you can get if you're going to get debt. Mortgage rates were around 3.5%. Today, mortgage rate is around 6.5%. So that's almost double what it used to be. That's a lot of money to be paying. And then if you're not an owner, if you're sort of thinking about having a credit card, in January of this year, the interest rate for excellent credit was 15%. And for a secured card, it was almost 20%. So if you think about it, if you're borrowing money and you're holding on to this debt, you could end up having to pay back your money that you borrowed plus a fifth of that money, which sort of adds up. Again, also, we're sort of thinking about planning long-term, thinking about retirement, and maybe we're not thinking about retirement because it seems very far away. But I will say this, if you don't plan for retirement, you may never retire. And that's even more exhausting than thinking about or not thinking about retirement. In addition to this, budgeting helps you plan and prepare for emergencies. A statistic that saddens me deeply is that a lot of people in America, if they got into trouble, if they needed bail of, say, $500, would not be able to afford that money. And so one hopes they don't have emergencies, but it is also smart to try to prepare for them. Highlighting your bad spending habits, I mentioned how I used to often try to ignore my money because there are these things that we do that we don't necessarily need to do and we probably cannot afford, but we want to do them. So we sort of dive into them. When you budget, you really get to see where your money is going and how you're doing it. And then if you have a budget and you know your plan and you got a plan, you sleep much better, which is something I need to do for other reasons. So I am sharing here two models for sort of thinking about budgeting basics. If in some states where living expenses and housing is not as expensive as it is in New York, which is where I am, there is a simple way of thinking about things, right? You spend half of your money on your needs. And when you think about your money, you should be thinking about your money after taxes. So you spend half of your money on your needs, then you sort of think about your savings. And then you think about perhaps the things that you might want to do sort of. So the savings are like your retirement plan. And then your wants are, you know, the trip, the dress, Disney, whatever it is. And so those are important. But however, if you're in a place where housing is expensive, and in many places now, the cost of housing can be as much as 35% or more of your budget. And so then you have to adjust, and perhaps you're not necessarily saving 20%, maybe you're saving 10%, and you're hoping that as life goes on, as you get more money, then you'll be able to build that percentage up. But all of this is, absolutely crucial to better understanding that, where your money is going, how it's going, how to make a plan, and sort of how to get ahead. So that's basics, right, of thinking about your budget. Now we come to credit, right? And I would never advocate borrowing money. However, we live in a system where the way that businesses can decide whether or not they trust you enough to lend you money is through you establishing a level of credit. And there are three credit reporting companies: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, and their system of scoring your credit is referred to as FICO. And in some cases, even if you're looking to rent an apartment, they might look at your credit report. And there's this 300 to 850 range. One of my tips here when it comes to thinking about your credit, remember your hard versus soft inquiry. So perhaps if you're looking to rent an apartment, they'll probably do a soft check, which doesn't impact your credit score. However, if you decide you want to apply for a credit card, they'll often do a hard inquiry, and that unfortunately reduces your credit score. And so if you're sort of thinking about building credit in any way, be very mindful of how many times you apply for a credit card, as just applying for a credit card could lower that score and then reduce the possibility of you actually being able to borrow money. And there are two types of borrowing money, like two main types, right? There are installment loans, which are like the mortgage, or paying off a car. You buy something, you're sort of paying off the debt. It gets smaller and smaller until you either own it outright, or you own it and then you sell it. And then there's revolving credit, which is what credit cards are, where you can add and you can take away, and you can add and you can take away, and your money goes sort of round and round in a circle. I will say this: if when you're thinking about credit, especially when you're starting out, one way in which you can start to build credit, actually there are two. One is if you're renting an apartment, you can sort of speak with your landlord about using your payment of your rent to report to your credit agency. And that is an important thing. And a lot of utility companies will do that as well. That helps you sort of build your credit without necessarily borrowing money and carrying debt. The other way you can do it is by having a secured credit card, where the way that works is you put money in, so you put in $500 and then you end up with sort of $500 in credit, and you can only spend up to your zero amount. So again, it helps you sort of manage your money and not build debt, but then all of your usage of that card goes towards raising your credit score. My tips: pay on time. If you can, keep no balances or low balances, because I do understand that sometimes, something happens, an emergency happens, and you need to sort of build debt, but always try to pay down as quickly as possible. And then monitor your credit report. So one thing to remember in all of this is that the three credit reporting agencies that I mentioned are now required to provide you with one free report a year. What I advise people to do is to spread it out. So every 4 months, get in touch with a credit reporting agency and get a free report. In addition to this, sometimes if you have like some bank accounts now will let you sort of look at your credit score. I use an app. I'm going to forget what it is. It's not Mint, but I think Mint helps you. So there's some apps or other places where you can sort of manage a budget online in an app, and they often will let you check your credit pretty often for free. And one of the reasons why this is important, not only to see how you're doing with your money, it's also to make sure that somebody else is not trying to do something with your identity, or sometimes the agencies make mistakes. So you check it every once in a while, make sure that what is in there is correct and what is in there is yours, but also track it to see how you're doing with your credit. Because in the long run, when you get to want to buy a house or you get to want to do anything, that credit score will determine in many ways your credit score, your interest rate. And I will say as an aside that often communities of color, we found that like some banks or financial institutions, even when one has a very good credit score, will charge higher interest rate than they would somebody, a white person with a similar credit score. So always advocate for research before you go in to learn more about like what prevailing interest rates are. Maybe look online to see what is being offered so that when you're going into a space to borrow money, should you want to buy a house or anything else, that you have a sense of what you should be charged so you can actually know what your sort of rights might be. Just wanted to give you this summary of credit information. You could see that we do live in a country of great debt, and unfortunately, with all of the inflation, all of the student debt, some of it is being sort of forgiven, but there's a lot of inflation. Things are getting expensive. People keep talking about the price of eggs, and things like that. And so, what has been happening is that, for instance, the 60 days past due percentage in this report is 1%. And that number is creeping up because of the pressures. But hopefully what I am talking you through today will help you stay out of that 60 days past due space and sort of move actually to a point where you are above the median score. It's a good start to managing money. Thank you very
Rumbi, I
much.
have to say it's a great start. Definitely a great start. I was like, oh my goodness, I wanted to keep going. I feel like we all felt that same exact way. So much great information that you shared.